So let's talk about the new set of questions I've sent you. So the first question is a linguistic variety defined on social as opposed to regional grounds, that is correlating correlating with a particular social.
Linguistic variety defined on social grounds, such as correlating with a particular social class or occupational group, is called a sociolect. This term refers to language variations associated with social groups rather than geographical regions.
So it correlates with a particular social class or occupational group, and this is known as sociolect. Moving on to the next question. So the elaborated code is used in relatively formal, educated situations. That's true. And it permits the speakers to be individually empowered to handle a wider range of situations. Both are true. Next, communicative competence is associated with Delheims. Next, the term is seen as a basic unit for the analysis of spoken interaction, and that is a speech event. Now, elaborate on this statement.
A speech event is a basic unit for analyzing spoken interaction. It refers to a specific instance or occasion where language is used within a particular context. This could be anything from a conversation, a meeting, or even a formal speech. The idea is that each event has its own rules, conventions, and structures that guide how communication occurs. By analyzing speech events, researchers can understand how people use language in various settings and how social, cultural, and situational factors influence communication.
Now, the next question is the strategies students use to improve their progress in developing skills in second language are called, so these are called language learning strategies. Now, the next question, a process in foreign language learning whereby learners carry over what they already know about in their first language into their use in the foreign language is termed as interlanguage. It's called interference, not interlanguage. So interlanguage is basically, when a person is learning a new language, he tends to use a different kind of language from the target language, and that is called interlanguage. If correct me if I'm wrong about interlanguage, and also explain this question. The correct answer to this question is interference. So do those two things.
You're right that interference is when learners apply rules or patterns from their first language to a new language, leading to errors or non-standard usage in the target language. On the other hand, interlanguage is a term used to describe the evolving language system that learners create as they progress towards full proficiency in a new language. It represents the transitional state between the learner's native language and the target language, encompassing elements of both and showing how learners gradually refine their understanding and use of the new language.
Now, the next question, a linguistic phenomena uh, based on the principle of isochrony or the principle of equal timeliness is called meter. Now, explain these terminologies and the mechanism that they fall into.
Meter, in linguistic terms, refers to a rhythmic pattern in speech or poetry based on the principle of isochrony. Isochrony means equal timing or regular intervals, which is crucial in rhythmic and poetic structures. In the context of meter, this principle involves dividing speech into equal time units, creating a predictable rhythm. For example, in poetry, meter arranges syllables in a pattern of stressed and unstressed beats, like iambic pentameter in Shakespeare's sonnets. This concept falls under prosody, which is the study of rhythm, stress, and intonation in spoken language. It helps to analyze how these rhythmic patterns contribute to the flow and structure of both poetry and natural speech.
All right, moving on to the next question. The arrest of progress in language learning is known as fossilization. Now, explain to me and exemplify what this really is.
Fossilization in language learning refers to the phenomenon where a learner's progress in acquiring a new language halts at a certain stage. This means they stop improving or making significant changes, even though they continue to learn the language. For example, a non native English speaker might always use incorrect verb tenses, like saying, I go to the store instead of I went to the store, despite being exposed to correct usage multiple times. This persistent error becomes fossilized because it becomes ingrained in their language use. Fossilization often happens due to a lack of further practice, insufficient feedback, or deeply ingrained habits from the learner's first language.
Now, the next question, the idea that child is born biologically equipped to acquire language is attributed to Noam Chomsky. The next question, learning in a relaxed.
Yes, that's correct. Noam Chomsky proposed the idea that children are born with an innate ability to acquire language, known as the innate hypothesis or universal grammar. This theory suggests that the capacity for language is hardwired into the brain, and that children naturally pick up the rules of their native language through exposure.
The next question, learning in a relaxed situation against the background of Baroque music coupled with the teachers reading out dialogues in foreign language with a special information for learners to understand and memorize is called Suggestopedia.
Yes, that's right. Suggestopedia is a teaching method developed by Georgy Lozanov, which emphasizes a relaxed learning environment, often with calming background music to enhance language acquisition. The approach uses positive suggestion and a comfortable setting to help learners absorb new information more effectively.
Now the next question, formant analysis belongs to acoustic phonetics. I I don't have much idea about it. What is formant analysis and how does this relate with acoustic phonetics? As far as I know, acoustic phonetics talks about the physical characteristics of sound wave as it travels through the medium from the speaker to the listener. So tell me about it. What is formant analysis?
Formant analysis is a technique used in acoustic phonetics to analyze the resonant frequencies of the vocal tract when producing speech sounds. These resonant frequencies, known as formants, are crucial in distinguishing different vowel sounds. In simpler terms, formants are the peaks in the frequency spectrum of a sound, which help us identify the vowels and some other speech sounds. Acoustic phonetics studies these properties to understand how speech sounds are produced and perceived, focusing on the physical characteristics of the sound waves. So, formant analysis fits into this by providing a detailed look at how these resonant frequencies shape the sounds we hear.
Maybe I'll have to.
No worries. Formant analysis helps us understand how different vowel sounds are produced by looking at the frequency patterns in speech. For instance, when you say the vowel A in cat, it has a specific pattern of formants that differs from the vowel I in sit. This analysis is a key part of acoustic phonetics, which deals with the physical properties of speech sounds. If you have any more questions or need clarification on this, feel free to ask.
So, format analysis is what is format analysis like? A rough idea, a simpler explanation.
Formant analysis is a method used to study vowel sounds by examining the frequency patterns in the speech signal. Vowels have distinct frequency peaks called formants, which help us identify them. For example, the vowel sound in beat has different formants than the vowel in boot. This analysis helps us understand how different vowel sounds are produced and perceived.
All right, let's move on to the next question. So, pitch belongs to acoustic. No, 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 no. It belongs to auditory phonetics. So, what is pitch exactly, and how does it belong to auditory phonetics?
Pitch is the perceived frequency of a sound, which determines how high or low it sounds. It's a key aspect of auditory phonetics because it relates to how we hear and interpret these frequency changes. While acoustic phonetics focuses on the physical properties of sound, auditory phonetics deals with how we perceive these sounds, including pitch.
So, pitch is measured in terms of frequency. Is it so?
Yes, pitch is measured in terms of frequency. Higher frequencies correspond to higher pitches, while lower frequencies correspond to lower pitches.
So can you elaborate briefly what frequency really is? In terms of how it looks or something like that.
Frequency refers to the number of vibrations or cycles a sound wave completes in 1 second. It's measured in hertz. For instance, a higher frequency means the sound wave cycles more times per second, producing a higher pitch, like a whistle. A lower frequency means fewer cycles per second, creating a lower pitch, like a drum beat.
So higher cycles per second means higher pitch, and it is measured in terms of hertz. So higher number of cycles per second is going to have a relatively higher number of hertz as compared to lower number of cycles per second. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct. A higher number of cycles per second means a higher frequency, which corresponds to a higher pitch and a higher hertz value. Conversely, fewer cycles per second result in a lower frequency and pitch with a lower hertz value.
All right, moving on to the next question. Stricture type. Stricture type belongs to, of course, the articulatory phonetics. Stricture type, what does this term really mean?
Stricture type refers to how the speech organs constrict the airflow to produce different sounds. In articulatory phonetics, this categorizes sounds based on how and where the airflow is restricted, such as stops, fricatives, or nasals. Each type affects the sound's production and acoustic properties.
One sentence. Tell me the same thing in one sentence. Can you hear me? So the next question is lexical diffusion. Yeah, the about the structure type. So tell me about that same thing. In a very brief in a very brief number of words.
Stricture type describes how speech organs restrict airflow to create different sounds, like stops or fricatives.
Okay, and the next question is lexical diffusion. So, lexical diffusion was proposed by William Wang, and Krishnamurti, J. Krishnamurti, probably. So, tell me in detail about lexical diffusion, what it is, when was it proposed, and who proposed it, right? And the people who proposed it, of uh, in which work was this thing, lexical diffusion proposed? Yeah, tell me more about it. And
Lexical diffusion is a theory about how sound changes spread through a language. According to this theory, changes start in a few words and gradually spread to others over time. This contrasts with the idea that changes affect all words at once. William Wang and J. Krishnamurti proposed this theory. They introduced it in the early 1960s. The theory was detailed in Wang's work, particularly in the paper titled The Theory of Lexical Diffusion, which was part of a broader study on language change and phonological processes.
so, can you give me an example of lexical diffusion, of what really lexical diffusion might look like?
Sure. Imagine a sound change, like a vowel shift, starts in a specific word, such as boat, where the vowel sound changes from O to O. Over time, this change might begin to affect similar words like coat and float, but not all at once. First, boat might shift, then coat, and later float. This gradual spread from a few words to others is an example of lexical diffusion.
All right, let's move on to the next question. The next question is the regularity hypothesis. Of course, this belongs to the neo-grammarians. Neo-grammarians say that sound change is regular and purely phonetically conditioned. So, according to the neo-grammarians, the sound change is phonetically gradual and lexically abrupt. And according to the William Wang and J. Krishnamurti, the lexical diffusion. According to the lexical diffusion, sound change is lexically gradual and phonetically abrupt. Is that true?
Yes, you're correct. Neo-grammarians who proposed the regularity hypothesis argue that sound changes are regular and phonetically conditioned, meaning they affect all instances of a sound in a consistent way. They see sound changes as phonetically gradual, but lexically abrupt, meaning the change happens gradually in terms of phonetics, but affects words suddenly. On the other hand, lexical diffusion, as proposed by William Wang and J. Krishnamurti, views sound changes as lexically gradual and phonetically abrupt. This means that sound changes spread gradually through the vocabulary but can occur abruptly at the phonetic level.
Now, the next question is the transformational generativists approach belongs to Noam Chomsky. Now, what can you tell me about the transformational generativist approach?
The transformational generative grammar approach, developed by Noam Chomsky, is a theory that aims to describe the implicit knowledge speakers have about their language. It emphasizes the idea that humans have an innate ability to understand and generate language. Key elements include 1. Generative grammar. It refers to a set of rules that can generate all the grammatical sentences in a language and exclude ungrammatical ones. 2. Transformations. These are rules that convert one sentence structure into another, showing how sentences can be transformed while preserving meaning. For example, changing a statement into a question. 3. Universal grammar. Chomsky proposes that all human languages share a common underlying structure, and our ability to acquire any language is due to this universal grammar. This approach revolutionized the study of syntax and influenced many areas of linguistic theory.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Observer's paradox. It was proposed in the year 1917 by Sturtevant, probably. And no. Observer's paradox belongs to William Labov, actually. So, explain to me what really is observer's paradox in detail.
Observer's paradox, proposed by William Labov, addresses the challenge of studying natural language use, while also considering the impact of observation on that language use. The paradox arises because the act of observing or recording speech can influence how people speak. In essence, when people know they are being observed or recorded, they might alter their speech patterns to conform to perceived social norms or to present themselves in a certain way. This can affect the authenticity of the data collected. Labov introduced this concept in the 1960s while studying language variation and change. His work, particularly in urban dialects, highlighted that linguistic research must account for the fact that observation itself can shape language behavior.
All right, moving on to the okay. So tell me about the observer's paradox. When and in which work did William Labov propose this concept of observer's paradox?
William Labov introduced the concept of observer's paradox in his work on sociolinguistics, particularly in his studies of urban dialects. He first articulated this idea in the late 1960s with a key presentation of it in his 1966 study, The Social Stratification of English in New York City.
Now, the next comparative method. Comparative method is associated with which person? So, comparative method is associated with, I believe, um, August Schleicher. Elaborate more on what this really means. Comparative method is associated with August Schleicher. It's a German name. It's very hard to pronounce.
Yes, the comparative method is associated with August Schleicher. Schleicher, a German linguist from the 19th century, used this method to study the relationships between languages. It involves comparing languages to reconstruct their common ancestors and understand how they have evolved over time. By analyzing similarities and differences in vocabulary, grammar, and phonology, linguists can infer how languages are related and trace their historical development.
So August Schleicher, he talked about the tree modeling, and the students of August Schleicher were itself the neo-grammarians, as I believe. Is that true?
Yes, that's correct. August Schleicher is known for his family tree model of language evolution, where he likened the relationships between languages to branches of a tree. His ideas influenced the neo-grammarians, who further developed and refined his theories. The neo-grammarians focused on the regularity of sound changes and were instrumental in advancing historical linguistics.